The Massacre at Montsegur. Cathar 172. Tomorrow, 16th of March, is the anniversary of the massacre of 225, mainly Cathar perfecti, who were burnt by the Crusaders and the Catholic Church on that day. There were far worse massacres than that. There was Béziers, the city of Béziers, when the Crusade started in 1209, and in June, I think, and there they wiped out the entire town. Now, people argue as to how many people were there, but it wasn't just the city, because when they knew the Crusaders were coming down to attack them, a lot of people from the countryside would have gone into the walled city for protection. So no one's absolutely sure how many were actually wiped out. But the town was burnt and every man, woman and child was killed. That's when those words were uttered, which is synonymous with aspects of Cathar history. They asked Amory, the monk, how will you tell, we're going to kill them, how will you tell the Catholics apart from the Cathars? And he said, kill them all, kill them all. He said, God will sort them out. So, and they were. And he reported in his letter to the Pope that 20,000 men, women and children were massacred, and what a wonderful day. Great celebrations. So that was probably the worst single massacre, but another one was at Marmont, and that was in, actually no one's actually sure, but it was at Christmas time, December, anyway, most likely in December of 1219. And there, that was attacked, and King Louis, who had just come back from England, and interestingly, King John of England died, and that made King Louis the first of France actually King of England. But he's not officially listed as one of the kings of England, but the crown went to him when King John died. Just a little aside there. But anyhow, he returned to France, and then he attacked Marmont, and it's interesting. We have historical records of people who were there. The Song of the Crusade, an amazing book, but in that it's the authorship was attributed to William of Tudela, who was a troubadour and a good Catholic, but they know there was two authors. The second author is uncertain, but he may not have sympathised with the Cathars, but he was very, very much against the Crusaders coming from France, and he always referred to them as the French, because he was a southerner from that time, from the Midi. But he wrote, as regards the massacre of Marmont, he said, terror and massacre began. Lords, ladies and their little children, men and women stripped naked. All were slashed and cut to shreds by keen-edged swords. Flesh, blood, brains, torsos, limbs and faces hacked in two. Lungs, livers and guts torn out and thrown away, laying on the open ground, as if they had rained down from the heavens. Marshland and firm ground was all red with blood. Not a man or woman was left alive, neither young nor old. No living creature except perhaps some well-hidden infant. Marmont was raised and set alight. Very soon afterwards, King Louis, that is King Louis I, left for Toulouse. So that's very explicit. We don't have the same account for the massacre at Montsegur, simply because the two books that chronicled the crusade neither of them had reached the period of the massacre at Montsegur. So that was a different kettle of fish again. But it wasn't just the 225 people that were killed, and they also threw three. I'm aware, I've been channeled that there was 3 children thrown into the flames as well. But that was when the heart and soul of Catharism was wiped out. The flame was extinguished at Montsegur when they were burnt, because so many Cathar perfecti, but they were people of Raymond Marty, Bishop Raymond Marty, who'd taken over from Bishop Gilbert de Castro, who had died naturally. And to date no one's found where he was buried, or what cave he was buried in, because the Cathars were buried in caves to stop them being dug up and burnt, even though they were dead and burnt by the Inquisition. But the massacre of Montsegur was a pivotal moment in the history of Catharism, because that was the end of from that point, because so many Cathar perfecti and the people of the faith, the teachers, the educators, were burnt, and it was very much downhill from then on for Catharism. So even though there are books such as Montsegur which talk about Cathars, but that was way down the track, and it was a time when there was virtually no perfecti, no teachers, no one there to guide the Cathars. So that was at a low point. So Catharism certainly can't be judged by that. Everyone thought, because of its position and its height and the cliffs surrounding it, that Montsegur was impregnable. I've climbed Montsegur 6 times. I hope, I intend also to climb Montsegur again this year, certainly at least once. Why? Because I like climbing mountains? No, because when I climb there, even though there's this tragedy that happened, I feel this sense of tranquility and peace. Now, some may accept this, others may not, but I, my ex-wife, my present partner, I have a number of friends who were also burnt on that day at Montsegur. I know another lady in the United States of America. She knows because she had a past life regression, and she describes being pushed and herded onto the flames, and she was a group of 3 young girls and an older lady, perfecti, who kept telling her, because the flames were ahead, and this young girl was looking around at the tumult, the chaos that was going on around them, and the older perfecti lady was saying to her, stay focused, keep focused, don't look around, stay focused. It's like stepping over a stone. So when it's actual time to die, it's like stepping over a stone. Why say that? Well, the thing is that when a person's dying, firstly, we need to remember that we're a soul with a body, and this soul is immortal. Once it's created, it's immortal. Most religions go along with that. But with Catharism, and with most religions in the East, we have reincarnation. So the soul uses various bodies. So when it's time, for whatever reason, the person's dying and it's on the deathbed, it's come to that, the soul has no longer any need of that particular body and the soul goes. If a person is jumping out, and I still remember those images of the Twin Towers in New York and the people jumping out, I mean, the feeling that I got and others must have got when those people jumped out of those Twin Towers, to see them coming down and falling. But the thing is, the moment that person jumps out, the soul, the body is going to hit the ground, and obviously that's finished. So the soul, having no need of it, the soul is disappearing. So when I see those bodies, what I'm seeing in my mind is the soul already departing from the body, because the moment that person decides to jump out and jumps, the soul is gone. So there's just a lump of flesh that's heading down and plunging towards the earth. I've climbed, as I said, Montsegur 6 times. It takes about 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes. That's a person who's in reasonable condition, as I consider that I am. But for a person who's a little bit elderly, or I'm elderly, or a bit on the frail side, that could take them 40, even 45 minutes. It's a good climb, and although they've been working on the path and fixing it up and cutting steps here and there and so forth, it's still a solid climb for anybody. But it's certainly worth it, and I'm informed that some 60,000 people a year climb it. They don't know exactly how many, because some people come there in the evening when obviously the people in charge and giving you a ticket is gone, and some might come at 5 o'clock in the morning. So there could be those people who do that, and of course no one really knows how many climb it. But I can tell you, because when I was staying over there, on a couple of occasions I heard a helicopter. And I thought, oh, what's that? What do they need a helicopter around here? It was a bright sunny day, and there didn't seem to be any disaster on. And my friend who I was staying with said, oh no, that's because half a dozen times a year, people going up or coming down Montsegur have a heart attack, and the only way to get them is by helicopter. Tomorrow's the anniversary. In time, tomorrow will become known as Montsegur Day or Cathar Day, who knows, because these things over time create their own energy, their own name. So I'm certainly not going to put a name to it. But that will happen. It's just because there are just so many people who visit Montsegur, both the mountain and the village. What can I tell you about Montsegur? Well, I met a woman once who climbed it, and we were talking, and she said, no, I've climbed Montsegur, and she just said, I broke into tears, and she said, I cried and cried and cried and cried. She said the emotions were overwhelming. And so when I first went Montsegur, I thought I might have similar emotions, but no, nothing. I felt the utmost peace and tranquility. But it is a place of high energy, and some people really feel that. But I took out my pendulum, which I was carrying, and normally the pendulum just spins round, or whatever direction it's going to go. But when I took it out there, it was literally like the rotors of a helicopter. It was spinning so fast and so with so much energy that it literally would not. I just had to hold it to stop it. It was just so there's some amazing energy levels on the top of that mountain. Of course, the view was great, and most times I've been up there, there's also people sitting there, and some people are meditating. There's people explaining the history of Montsegur. One aspect about Montsegur was the fact that when they capitulated, they surrendered to the Crusaders because they were the Crusaders had managed to get up to a certain area where they could have a mangonel, that's a stone throwing machine, and those stones they're 20 kilos. They're large stones because we've been down and I've been searching for them and found them. They're huge. And they had people chipping away at these, creating the stones for the mangonel, and they were flying through, and of course they're silent, and people would get hit and killed, and this kept up, and they were battering the walls. So eventually there was no help coming, so they surrendered. But what they did ask for was for 2 weeks that they knew they were going to be burnt, but they wanted that 2 weeks before that, and the Crusaders agreed to it. Now, why they wanted that 2 weeks was because, which I find quite amazing, that a number of these mercenaries, these hard-bitten soldiers, these sergeant-at-arms, and some had wives, others had girlfriends, but there's half dozen of them, and they decided that they wanted to stay and die and be burnt with their Cathar friends. They could have left freely, and that was it, but no, they agreed with the loving ways, the ideals of the Cathars, and they decided that they wanted to be burnt with them. On the day, 2nd of March, early in the morning, it was cold, and they were herded down this very narrow track, and much worse than what it is today, and to a field below. There's discussion as to which field, because there's one directly below the track coming off the mountain, and there's a larger field to the left. I've been told it's the larger field to the left. It makes sense to me, because there they could put up a huge palisade, and there were literally hundreds and hundreds of people who came, onlookers, and all the priests and monks and what have you, with their crucifixes, and they would have been there as onlookers. So the field down below, it seems to be a bit small for that. But that's beside the point. They were herded down, and there was a palisade, and the fire was burnt, and the knights and the horses were herded into the Cathars into the flames. In the book, The Cathar Message, there's a poem. This poem was channeled down, but it explains far better than I what went on that day. And we went barefoot. We had cast our shoes, whatever we had left of brooch and buckle, into our cloaks, and down the cleft beyond the battlements. So we went barefoot to our funerary pile, cloakless, with just one garment for propriety, for then we were no longer needy men and women. We had left all riches and coin when we came to join in perfect love the cause. Now there was less than ever pause to think about that we might need. Our mortal bodies need no longer heed cold rain or stony pathway. No more was needed on that day, no longer held in check. In single file, one by one, barefoot we went, singing until our breath was spent, the song of perfect joy. At some time in the future, somehow, somewhere, I intend to find the words that the song of perfect joy. Of course, it's in Occitan, but the English translation. This was a song that the Cathars sang at other times when they were being burnt to death. That was the one thing. Now, again, the people who chronicled, who told the story of the times that the Cathar perfecti, the Cathar clergy, although they weren't priests in the way of a Catholic clergy, religious clergy. But when they were being burnt, they did not scream. Now this goes back to the fortnight, the 2 weeks, that the perfecti requested from the Crusaders, because they needed that 2 weeks to be able to school, to be able to teach the sergeant-at-arms, the mercenary soldiers who decided, and their girlfriends and wives, who decided to stay and die with the Cathars. They needed that period of time to teach them how to psych themselves so that they wouldn't feel the fierce heat of the flames. Some may think that's impossible, but the plain fact is that Anthony Robbins, who now I believe lives in India, but he was in Sydney certainly half a dozen times to my knowledge, and certainly at least on 3 of those occasions he had a pit 20 foot long, 3 foot wide, filled with wood, and that wood was allowed to burn down until it was just, there were still red hot ashes there. And then the people doing his course, which they paid a couple of $1,000 for the weekend, but those people, I don't say everyone on the course, but those who decided that they wanted to, they were all lined up. Then each of those people ran across in barefoot. They'd psyched themselves up in the manner that he had taught them, and they'd ran across those burning coals, and their feet are fine, completely unscathed. So it's an uncontestable fact that people can train their mind that they won't feel pain within a situation like being burnt, because as I said, Anthony Robbins had on his courses, and I know that happened because a friend of mine used to organise his courses for him. And I also know 2 people who are on those courses who actually went across those flames. So that is an unarguable fact. So this is what the Cathars needed that 2 weeks to do to the church, that is the Catholic Church. Catharism, I believe, is still their number one enemy. Their heresy being the enemy, and the Cathar heresy is still something that they don't want to, like a phoenix, arise from the ashes. But you can burn people, you can destroy a person's mind, but you can't destroy an ideal, and certainly a loving ideal that the Cathars had, and that was of literally all about love, all aspects of love, including unconditional love. They were persecuted, but the Cathars were the opposite. They persecuted nobody. And in fact, when they had their university, and you can say it's the first universities in France, because they had the scholars, Saracen scholars, the Muslim Arab scholars come and study and debate and learn from them, because the Saracens at that time were they was the high point of science, for mathematics, for poetry, for art, and medicine, and the Cathars learnt these skills from their Saracen brothers. There were also the Jewish scholars. The Jewish scholars were there, and they also learnt from their traditions and so there was no us against you or you against us or we against them. It was simply all people were invited and were there to learn from each other. All this tolerance, understanding for another's point of view, another's beliefs, was all wiped out by the church. There's a saying that they had then in Latin, Amor Versus Roma. Amor being love, the Cathars, and Roma meaning power, or Rome. And Rome was the centre of all power in Europe in those days. So to the Cathars, it was love versus power, Amor versus Roma. Rome won that battle, but that's only one battle. And the struggle still goes on. The cause is still there. The Cathar, there's a reawakening. It's happening all over the world. As I said, in Montsegur, there's 60,000 a year climb that mountain. So there's 60,000 people that are aware of the Cathar movement. If you ever have the chance to go to Montsegur, or to the south of France in general, the Ariège area, around Languedoc, the Occitan, the Midi, it's a wonderful, wonderful area. The food's great, the wine's great, and it's a wonderful area to explore with the caves and the history behind it. I've had the pleasure of being there twice. I intend to be there many times in the future. Who knows? We may even have the pleasure of meeting each other sometime over there. That would certainly be a delight. So tomorrow is the anniversary. It was a massacre, a tragedy. But they knew. They knew it was going to happen. All the Cathars knew that this was going to happen. And so what they did was they trained and they schooled their minds to be able to face the flames when it did happen. It's all now become part of not just the history of the south of France or France. This is now belongs to the world. It's now part of world history. Amor versus Roma. Love versus power. I believe love, amor, will be the ultimate winner. Bye for now. Talk again.